take up the challenge. But the war has drained them of manpower and resources. As Germany escalates its bombing raids, Florey pushes his team to find creative ways to increase production on their own. Soon, penicillin mold is growing in containers scrounged from everywhere. Finally, they have enough to treat a human patient. They choose a 43-year-old policeman who scratched his cheek on a rose thorn. A staph infection has spread from the tissues of his face to his eyes and lungs.
None of these sulfur drugs had helped, and he was really at death's door. And so he was given penicillin, and within a couple of days the effect was noticeable. And he made great progress for 5 days, and then the penicillin ran out.
The urine of the policeman had been collected, taken back to the laboratory over the preceding days, and they'd recovered penicillin, which was unchanged in the urine, and purified it as best as they could in those days, and re-injected it.
But there wasn't enough, and he relapsed and lived for about a month and then died.
Despite the tragedy, a new batch of penicillin completely cures infections in the next 5 patients. But it has taken 19 researchers working night and day for months to save only a handful of lives. Florey knows that if the drug is to save thousands, he will have to get help. He finds it in America, where government agencies and pharmaceutical companies figure out how to go from tiny quantities to mass production. On the eve of D-Day, 1944, millions of units have been produced and stockpiled. The Allies now have enough penicillin to treat all their battle casualties in the invasion of Europe. They can treat difficult wounds that once would have led to amputation or death. The mold that flew into Fleming's lab would save thousands in the next few months, and millions more in the years to come. Never before has a single drug done so much.
Impact of penicillin is that it has changed who is living in this world and who isn't. I have often said when I talk to a group of students that you may not feel that any specific vaccine or medicine has allowed you to be here. But if you went back only 1 generation or 2 generations, you might be surprised how few of you would be in this audience. Myself, for instance, in the 1940s, I was treated with penicillin for septicemia, where the physician said 2 years ago we could not have done this. So I feel like I owe my existence to this one drug. Now, my children, unless I tell them, won't understand they owe their existence to the fact that penicillin was available for me in the 1940s. It's been a miracle drug.
Penicillin's wartime success is a triumph for all of science. Soon, public support for medical research vastly increases as everyone waits for the next medical miracle that will surely come. By mid-century, the crippling disease polio is so feared that some parents lock their children away during the summer months when the risk of infection is greatest. But before long, a new life-saving polio vaccine joins penicillin in what the public assumes will be a long line of medical breakthroughs. Our confidence seems to be well-founded when polio is virtually wiped out in Western countries. So continuous is the string of new vaccines and antibiotics that many observers predict an end to all infectious diseases in the foreseeable future. At the same time, there's also the belief that surgery is entering its own golden age. Surgeons are now tackling problems once thought impossible to solve. Their prime target, an organ that for centuries was considered untouchable, the human heart. The carnage of World War II forces surgeons to try risky procedures to save the battlefield wounded. One of the most dangerous involves soldiers with bullets and shell fragments lodged in the chambers of their hearts. Few surgeons had ever cut into a heart out of fear it might suddenly stop. Going against conventional wisdom, a young Army doctor named Dwight Harkin dares to try. He cuts a small hole in the wall of the heart and secures it with stitches. Then, blindly, by touch, as the heart still beats, he locates and removes the metal fragments. Within days, his first group of soldiers recovers, proving that the human heart is not too fragile for surgery. Buoyed by Harkin's success, post-war doctors hope to save thousands of children born with defective hearts. Breathless and blue with swollen fingers and toes, their hearts are too damaged to properly circulate their blood. Few live to adulthood. Their plight attracts doctors at the University of Minnesota. Among them is surgeon Walton Lillehei.
These children were dying with simple little holes in the heart that any seamstress could sew up in about 30 seconds. But these people were dying because these defects are in the center of the heart. You cannot reach them from the outside. And there was no way of sewing in a blood-filled heart that was beating until you empty the heart.
But an empty heart can no longer pump blood to the body. Without blood, all the organs deteriorate and the brain suffers irreversible damage in less than 4 minutes. It's just not enough time to operate. The obstacle seems insurmountable. Then a young Canadian surgeon named Bill Bigelow begins experimenting with a technique called hypothermia. He knows that the fierce Canadian winter acts to slow down the hearts of hibernating animals, allowing them to survive months without food. So he tries to get the same effect by chilling dogs and discovers that he can operate on their slowed hearts for more than 4 minutes. This convinces Lillehei and his colleagues that hypothermia might work on humans as well. After months of preparation, the Minnesota surgeons are ready to try. A dying girl is wrapped in a special blanket that cools her body temperature 17 degrees below normal. The doctors have 10 minutes to empty her heart of blood, locate the hole, and make the repair. They begin at 10 past 10 in the morning.
When we had closed the hole inside the heart, and the heart started beating with a normal beat and normal blood pressure, and I looked up at the clock. It was about 10:15 in the morning, and I remember saying, "This is it, fellows. This is the beginning of open heart surgery."
The child's recovery is complete when her body temperature is brought back to normal with warm water. Lillehei will go on to perform dozens of hypothermia operations. But these are extremely risky procedures, not only for the patient, but for the surgeon, who has no margin for error.
Many times the diagnosis was incorrect, and the surgeon would be standing there looking at a very complex congenital heart anomaly with only 10 minutes to carry out some kind of an operative maneuver.
And if you went colder with the body to get more time to protect the brain, you could not restart the heart.
Well, you can imagine the difficulty, and of course, it was very stressful.
In an attempt to gain more time to operate, Lillehei tries an even more audacious procedure called cross-circulation. He connects the blood vessels of a dying child with those of his parent. While the father's heart pumps the child's blood, Lillehei has all the time he needs. But this is a desperate operation few surgeons dare to try because of the risk it poses to the healthy parent. For heart surgery to go forward, there had to be a better way.
The human heart sounds like this. When that sound stops, life stops. The inexorable rule. Today, even that rule has an exception. Medical scientists can, if they must, stop a heart to repair it. But they must have a substitute heart to do its work. And this they now have. It's a machine.
This is the breakthrough Lillehei has been waiting for. The heart-lung machine, which can circulate and oxygenate a patient's blood while the surgeon operates. Invented by surgeon John Gibbon, it has taken decades to perfect. By 1956, Lillehei is so confident of its effectiveness, he dares to repair the heart of a child on prime-time television.
The mechanical heart-lung takes over. Debbie's heart is open.
The hole in her heart is too large to sew up, so Lillehei repairs it with a special plastic patch. This operation, once regarded as unimaginable, will soon be routine.
Another chapter, another journey. In human terms, it could be measured in the skill of medical scientists who take in their hands the heart and the life of a child. But the point of our story seems clear. The age of scientific discovery is just beginning. A time like ours, there has never been.
Heart-lung machines free the surgeon to try almost anything. If a valve is damaged beyond repair, an artificial one can be put in. If arteries are blocked, they can be bypassed or replaced, thus diminishing the major cause of heart attacks.
There was a whole new feeling that we could really do very effective things about illness, and the ability to open up a patient's chest and go in and operate on his or her heart, for example. That was miraculous to see. I mean, people who had been profoundly invalided by their cardiac conditions for years, I mean, you can't say they just sort of walked off the operating table, but it was close to that.
After conquering the heart, surgeons tackle another major barrier, the transplantation of human organs. In Boston, doctors at the Peter Bent Brigham Hospital take the first tentative steps. The hospital is already a pioneer in the use of dialysis machines that cleanse the blood of patients with kidney disease. But for those whose kidneys have permanently failed, dialysis is the last stage before death. In a final attempt to save these patients, the Brigham doctors tried transplanting kidneys taken from cadavers. Although the new kidneys function perfectly, the patients soon die. Dr. Francis Moore was the Brigham's chief of surgery.
Early in this century, Dr. Alexis Carrel did do some kidney transplantations in cats, but none of them lived. And he didn't really realize why they didn't live, but they didn't live because of what we now call rejection. They were giving something new, and they said, no, that doesn't belong to us, we're going to throw it off.
Transplants of skin had been tried during World War II. But only skin from the victim's own body would take. When foreign skin was transplanted, the body's immune system destroyed it as if it were an infectious invader. The Brigham team tries to outwit the immune system with a number of techniques. They even wrap the transplanted kidney with a plastic bag. But nothing works. The body will not accept the one thing that can save it. Then, in 1954, Richard Herrick comes to the Brigham, dying of kidney failure. He's accompanied by his identical twin, Ronald, whose kidneys are a genetic match to his brother's. The hope is that one of Ronald's kidneys will be accepted by Richard's immune system. But surgeon Joseph Murray knows that even the idea of removing an organ from a willing donor is highly controversial.
We had to plan a major surgical operation to remove one kidney, not for his good, but for somebody else's. Now, the good Lord has given us 2 kidneys, and we knew that we could live on 1 kidney.
But it so basically and profoundly violates what physicians are trained to do. Do no harm. In this case, you harm a healthy person and turn that person into a patient because you have submitted him or her to a major surgical procedure.
One of my closest senior surgeons said, Joe, don't get involved in this, it'll ruin your career. But we had patients who were dying. They were mostly young. And if we didn't do it, who was going to do it? And it was the plight of the patients that I think that really kept us going.
On December 23, 1954, Murray gives one of Ronald's healthy kidneys to his brother. It's the first kidney transplant ever performed using a living donor. Richard's new kidney works perfectly, proving that transplantation is possible for identical twins. As news of the operation spreads, twins in similar circumstances rush to the Brigham. But they represent only a tiny fraction of patients with kidney failure. For the rest, there is still no hope.
And we entered a very unhappy period that I've called the Black Period, when patients were sent to us from all over the world who needed a kidney, but who had no identical twin. And for a while, we mostly sent them back home again. Others, we tried radiation. We gave them whole body irradiation.
Radiation temporarily destroys a patient's immune cells, so they can't attack the transplanted organ. But almost all the patients die from radiation poisoning or from infections the body is now powerless to stop.
We were on what I call the knife edge of survival. Tip one way, the kidney would reject. Tip another way, they die of radiation. But what was needed, we all knew and we all felt, was probably going to turn out to be a drug, a chemical compound. It might be a very simple chemical compound that would alter the patient's immunology so that the patient would be, you might say, fooled into thinking that the kidney belonged there.
In 1959, a report brings some hope. It describes a family of anti-cancer drugs that unexpectedly suppress the immune system. At the Brigham, doctors wonder if the drugs will prevent rejection and begin experiments on animals recovering from transplants. When the dogs remain alive after a year, the team feels ready to test the drugs on humans. When people start surviving as well, patients dying of kidney failure besiege the Brigham and other hospitals.
With the stampede that started essentially at the end or during the summer of 1963, nobody was prepared for what had transpired. It was like the Berlin Wall going down. It really created a tidal wave of enthusiasm and optimism.
With the new drugs in hand, surgeons begin working with other organs. Tom Starzl transplants the liver. James Hardy tries a lung. And the world waits to see if anyone will dare to replace a human heart.
The world's first heart transplant has been performed. Medical history has been made in South Africa. Newspapers everywhere carry banner headlines for the dramatic breakthrough.
On December 3rd, 1967, Christian Barnard, a South African surgeon, removes a heart from an accident victim and places it into the chest of a dying man. He survives only 18 days. But Barnard's next patient, Philip Bleiberg, lives on. His spectacular recovery spurs transplantation to new heights. By the end of 1971, there have been 170 heart transplants in 17 countries. But only 23 patients are still alive. The average survival rate is just 29 days. Even Barnard's first triumph, Philip Bleiberg, is dead. Rejection still remains the central problem with transplants, despite the new drugs.
Well, in the 1970s, I think there was a big lying contest that was going on, particularly in kidney transplantation, where the results with cadaver kidney transplantation were really terrible. The national average survival of kidneys at 1 year was 45%. That means 55 out of every 100 cadaver kidneys that were transplanted were lost within the first year, and almost half within the first 6 months. And yet many centers were claiming high rates of success. Personally, I thought at that time that kidney transplantation was more like a disease than a cure.
The only transplants that seem successful are those that use kidneys from living relatives who are genetically similar. But many surviving patients suffer painful side effects and countless infections from taking immunosuppressant drugs.
Because the margin between effective therapy and fatal complications was so narrow, right in that zone between the two were found a number of new diseases. And here you have exotic new infections with new viruses never previously seen in humans, new blood disorders, new kinds of pneumonias. It just was a primrose path of sorrow.
But transplant patients around the world are about to get a second chance at life. From a few ounces of soil gathered in Norway's remote tundra, comes a fungus containing cyclosporin. The new compound would be vastly more successful at preventing the rejection of transplanted organs.
Well, this ignited an entire new era. Programs that had abandoned transplants were springing up again, and everybody was getting good results.
And it did something that I had almost begun to despair would never be possible. And of course, if it wasn't possible, everything that had been invested, the lives of patients and the lives of healthcare personnel, would have been in vain.
Down as far as possible.
With cyclosporin, liver transplants, nearly abandoned, are now routine. Surgeon Nancy Asher has seen the 5-year survival rate climb from 30% to over 75%. But success has brought new dilemmas.
From a technical and from a medical standpoint, we have reached tremendous pinnacles in the field of solid organ transplant. The problems in solid organ transplant are not the medical ones and not the technical ones anymore. The problems today are that we don't have enough organs for all the people who could benefit from transplantation, and who's going to pay for all these expensive transplants, and what's going to happen once the patients get their transplants. Are they normal? Can they get insurance? Can they get jobs? These are the problems now.
We once thought if we could beat rejection, the barriers to transplantation would be lifted. But there are too few organs to save all the people who need them. Some patients still suffer severe complications, and others just don't make it. But many people who once faced death are living reasonably full lives now, grateful for the gift of transplantation. As surgeons performed ever more miraculous feats, other scientists were asking new questions about the nature of human illness, searching for reasons why our bodies fail in the first place. It's a quest that leads medical science to the very core of our being. By 1953, James Watson and Francis Crick had already unraveled the structure of DNA, the molecule that makes up our chromosomes and genes. Many scientists saw genes as a critical piece of the puzzle that explains how our bodies function, what we inherit from our parents, what makes us individuals, and perhaps what makes some of us terribly sick. When medical researchers turn their attention toward diseases that mysteriously spring up within us, like cancer, which is ravaging more and more people each year, some suspect that genes are involved, but no one knows how. What they do know is that the word cancer, not polio or tuberculosis, is now striking the greatest fear in our hearts.
You see that area there? That's the tumor there.
That red section.
This dense.
Throughout the 20th century, the number of cancer cases has grown steadily and alarmingly. But one of the most baffling trends is the rise in lung cancer. Some experts theorize that pollution from industry or automobiles may have something to do with the increase. But there is no proof for this or any other theory. In 1948, two British researchers, Bradford Hill and Richard Dahl, began their own search for the causes of lung cancer.
I personally thought when we started this study that it was probably something to do with motor cars. I mean, they were most obviously had increased enormously. Roads had been tarred, and we knew that fumes from tar could be carcinogenic. And if I had to bet, I would have bet it was something to do with the tarring of roads and with motor cars.
Hill and Dahl survey hospital patients with and without lung cancer. They ask where they live and work, what kind of job they have, the foods they eat, and how much they drive. and if they've ever smoked cigarettes.
When we started looking at the results, it very rapidly became clear that there was a crucial difference between patients with lung cancer and other patients. And that was, not only did people with the disease smoke cigarettes more often, but they smoked more heavily. They'd begun smoking earlier in life. They had less often given up smoking. And then when we looked around the world, we found countries where cigarette smoking had been common for some years, lung cancer was common.
To analyze what cigarette smoke contains, this cigarette smoking machine was built by scientists of the Sloan Kettering Institute for Cancer Research. It mechanically puffs each cigarette in turn and traps the smoke in glass tubes. The smoke contains a tar. The tar in the smoke condenses after a time on the bottom of the tubes. The tar from cigarette smoke was applied repeatedly to the skin of mice. This shows that it can cause cancer.
The Surgeon General of the United States, Luther Terry, himself a smoker, is finally swayed by the scientific evidence. In 1964, he issues a public warning against smoking.
There is a definite, significant health hazard associated with cigarette smoking. Cigarette smoking was the principal cause.
As he was driving to the State Department for the press conference, he was going through his notes, smoking a cigarette. One of his aides said, "You know, they're going to ask you about that." He said, "I know." He presented the press conference and then asked for questions. Someone asked, "Dr. Terry, do you smoke?" He said, "No, sir, I don't." "Dr. Terry, have you ever smoked?" "Yes, I used to." "Dr. Terry, when did you quit?" He said, 10 minutes ago.
Soon there are alarming new findings. Exposure to asbestos, certain chemicals, even too much sun can cause cancer. Meanwhile, doctors try radiation in addition to surgery in an effort to cure the disease. Although patients now survive longer, their malignancies soon return. The first cancer to show any promise of yielding to modern medicine is childhood leukemia. The disease develops when the body's blood-producing center, the bone marrow, creates an excessive group of malignant white blood cells, here the large purple ones. They quickly crowd out and destroy other cells in the marrow, including platelets, which help the blood to clot, and normal white blood cells, which help prevent infection. Victims suffer anemia, countless infections, and bleed profusely. Once diagnosed, these children have only 2 or 3 months to live. In 1949, Dr. Sidney Farber of Boston's Children's Hospital begins to experiment with a radical new approach to fight the disease. Because leukemia is characterized by the overproduction of white blood cells, Farber looks for any substance that might impair their growth. He knows that soldiers exposed to mustard gas suffered such severe damage to their bone marrow that it destroyed their white cells. Farber experiments with mustard compounds on his leukemia patients, but the chemicals prove too poisonous to use. He then tries a less toxic substance, a folic acid blocker, that also curtails white cell formation.
And lo and behold, the leukemia shrunk in a major way in a significant number of the patients. The normal marrow came back, that is, their anemia went away, their white count came up to normal, they could resist infections, they did not have bleeding, and when the marrow was looked at after 3 or 4 weeks, very often the marrow was free of leukemia cells. And they entered complete remission, and that was the good news. That was spectacular. That was, in fact, a miracle. The bad news was that, unfortunately, all of the patients relapsed.
Farber's patients are not cured because the drug they receive does not destroy all the leukemia cells left in their bodies.
Microscopic disease persisted. It's like a needle in a haystack. You couldn't find it by feeling. You couldn't find it by x-ray. You couldn't find it by a laboratory technique. But it was there in enough quantity so that it grew back in a matter of months, maybe sometimes as much as a year. When it grew back, the cells that grew back were the cells that survived the initial treatment. So logically, you might expect them to be resistant, and they were.
By the mid-1950s, Emil Frey joins a team of cancer physicians at the National Institutes of Health. They want to expand on Farber's work by experimenting with additional drugs, and they want to lengthen the course of treatment. But testing becomes impossible because the children die too soon, either from infections or excessive bleeding.
Start with the nose, the eyes, the throat, the bowel, the lungs, and with an inability to control that bleeding. If you had 5 patients like that in a ward of 20 patients, it was chaotic. It was enormously difficult. You could pack the nose in front, pack it in back, but that was traumatic, and often when the packs were removed, the bleeding started again. And psychologically, the mothers, the fathers, the nurses, everybody knew that once this bleeding started, it might be intermittent, but it was probably the end.
The leukemia team learns how to stop the bleeding by transfusing platelets from family members. They also administer regular doses of antibiotics, which halt the infections. Now children are living long enough to test the experimental drugs. Using Farber's compound and a new drug simultaneously, the team anxiously monitors the effect on their patients. In 90% of the cases, the disease is halted.
Now that's an extraordinary achievement if you think of it in terms of the context of the time. These were kids who came in destined to die of their disease. And to have 90% of them turn over and go into complete remission, have the disease completely disappear in 3 to 4 weeks, was the thing that I think persuaded me that we were going to get someplace in terms of cure. But it still was true that the vast majority of patients relapsed.
Despite these setbacks, the team has made a critical breakthrough in their understanding. Using 4 powerful drugs, they administer all of them simultaneously over several months. The regimen is difficult to tolerate, and patients suffer greatly from so many toxic chemicals in their bodies. But by the mid-60s, though no one knows it yet, about 40% of these pioneering children will survive long enough to be called cured. Over the next decade, further refinements bring cure rates for leukemia and several other cancers well above 70%. An optimistic President Nixon declares war on cancer, and money flows into cancer research. But by the mid-1970s, frustration with progress sets in. The main reason is that chemotherapy is not working nearly as well on the deadliest adult cancers, like those of the lung and breast. In truth, the treatment has always been a blunt instrument that happens to kill some cancer cells. It does not target the still mysterious process that creates the disease in the first place.
It became increasingly apparent that if we were to create a new generation of anti-cancer drugs, we'd have to figure out what makes cancer cells grow, or rather what makes them grow abnormally. And at that time, virtually nothing was known about the origins of human cancer, the motors that drive the unceasing proliferation of cancer cells. And the watershed discovery, the revolution in this field, came in 1975, 1976, when Harold Varmus and J. Michael Bishop discovered that within normal cells there lay genes which, when they became damaged, would now begin to instruct a cell to grow unceasingly, that is to say, to become a cancer cell.
What Bishop and Varmus discover is one gene from a special group we are all born with called proto-oncogenes. Over one's lifespan, proto-oncogenes help normal cells to reproduce, like these in the skin. But oncogenes are susceptible to damage, in this case by too much sun. And when damaged, they can force cells to multiply when they shouldn't. We now have one piece of the puzzle. Then, in the mid-1980s, Robert Weinberg and his colleagues find another.
By the early 80s, we began to realize there was a second class of damaged genes which played an equally weighty role in causing cancer. And these came to be called tumor suppressor genes. The role of the tumor suppressor genes in their normal incarnation was to suppress the growth of normal cells, to hold it down, to break their proliferation. And when these tumor suppressor genes became damaged, as we now realize, they become defective brakes. They no longer stop the proliferation of cells.
We now understand that the seeds of cancer lie within us, in the oncogenes that can force unrelenting growth, and the tumor suppressor genes that can fail to stop such growth. And we now know how we get the disease.
We all have at least three general kinds of ways in which our genes may be rendered abnormal. We may have inherited an abnormal form from our mother or from our father. That's a hereditary mutation. We may have a mutation result during our lifetimes because we encounter environmental factors that change the structure of our DNA, or we may simply suffer the results of the error-prone process that our cells must undergo to divide. Every time our cells divide, they copy vast amounts of DNA, and there is a certain inborn error rate.
Now, you might ask, after 5 billion years of evolution, why isn't the copying mechanism perfect? Why does it allow this terrible mistake to occur? And the reason is kind of interesting. Cells have to make mistakes when they replicate their DNA. That's what drives evolution. If we didn't make mistakes when we copied our DNA, we wouldn't be here. We'd be amoeba or something. However, we started because we couldn't have evolved. So viewed in that context, cancer is a side effect of evolution. It's mistakes that are made during DNA replication that, unfortunately, when they affect a small subset of genes, can start a disease.
Although we now know how cancer begins, we have yet to find new cures. But throughout the century, once science has truly understood a disease, it has, more often than not, found ways to overcome it.
I remind us that the origin of bacterial infections was in the 1880s, and the application of this to curing bacterial infections took until the 1930s and the 1940s. It took 2 full generations. Given the dramatic advances in biomedical research, it's not going to take 2 generations before we can convert our insights into the origin of disease into radically new kinds of cures. They're already slowly coming online, and in the first decade of the next century, we're going to be able to reap some of the fruits of this enormous amount of information we gained in the last quarter of the 20th century.
Although we're still waiting for new cancer remedies, modern medicine has already given us the potential for a life that's longer and healthier than ever before. At the start of the century, we could cure almost nothing. Now we expect to be cured of almost everything. Of course, there are still ailments we're powerless to stop. And every so often a new disease, like AIDS, emerges to confound us and test all our skills. But medical researchers have learned to fight back. There are medicines now that seem to be holding at bay the symptoms of some AIDS patients. For everyone, there's better diagnostic equipment that can detect disease early enough to cure it. And we have chemotherapy and surgery and high-tech procedures that save countless lives every day. What we don't save is money. Modern medicine can be extremely expensive. So the question now becomes, how can we distribute medical technology to everyone throughout the world, not just those who can afford it? In a regional hospital in northern Ghana, patients die of liver failure, just as they do in the West. But no one in this hospital expects a transplant. Throughout the century, scientific medicine rarely reached places like West Africa, and life expectancy lagged far behind the developed nations. But modern medicine is beginning to make an impact here, even if its benefits are sometimes hard to see. Every morning, villagers of Savalugu must travel a well-worn path to the local pond. Throughout this region, people are still plagued by infectious microorganisms and dangerous parasites long vanquished in the West. And water, so precious to life, can harbor germs that disable and even kill with depressing regularity. This pond is Savalugu's only source of drinking water, but it contains a debilitating parasite called guinea worm. The worms can grow several feet inside a person's body and cause a painful swelling when they are about to emerge. Victims can suffer for weeks at a time unless they get relief by having the white thread-like worms removed at the local clinic. Today, northern Ghana is one of the last remaining homes of guinea worm disease. But the parasite is on the verge of extinction, mainly through the efforts of Donald Hopkins.
Yes, look, here you can see the worm right under the skin. Here.
Hopkins was instrumental in the campaign that successfully eradicated smallpox in 1978. He remembers the boost this achievement gave to public health the world over, and he's determined to wipe out guinea worm as well.
It's been 20 years since smallpox was eradicated, and that was a tremendous accomplishment in itself. That was a very terrible disease. It killed millions of people through the centuries. But in addition to getting rid of smallpox, it also changed the way the world thinks about eradication in general, because it proved for the first time that indeed it is possible to kill one of these diseases altogether and remove it from the human experience.
Diseases like malaria, which are spread by insects, may never be eliminated entirely, but illnesses that rely on people to spread infection are more susceptible to eradication. Hopkins has traveled the world over teaching villagers and health workers how to filter guinea worm parasites from their water. He also warns people to stay away from ponds when they have emerging worms. If the worm in someone's body is kept from the water, it cannot reproduce, and its life cycle is broken. Hopkins predicts that by the year 2000, there will be no guinea worm parasites left on Earth. The decline of guinea worm disease is just one indication of an extraordinary transformation in the health of many developing nations around the world. Not only is medical aid reaching more people, but better nutrition and a declining birth rate are also starting to make a difference.
Many other Westerners who come here might see the problems that remain and focus only on those. I'm very much heartened by the progress that we've seen over the last 10 years, over the last 5 years, and much longer perspective than that. I've seen many more children immunized now, for example, than were being immunized 5 years ago. We're on the verge of eradicating polio within about 5 years of that, we think. We have many more communities having access to safe drinking water. There are many markers of progress, and certainly the people living in these communities see the progress, whether other people from the West can see it or not. They are well aware of the fact that life indeed is getting better.
It has been the less visible products of medical science, the vaccines, prenatal care, and basic health services, that have made the biggest impact on the lives of people here, just as they did in the West earlier in the century. Lacking most of medicine's more expensive technologies, many people in developing nations are now routinely living to their 70s. Quite a change from just a few decades ago. As people everywhere grow older, societies will be challenged to care for an aging population. But at the start of the century, many of us died in infancy, and few of us ever reached our 70s.
My grandmother had 10 children. Only 5 of them survived infancy. 5 went on to become adults, 1 being my father. But when he was born, he was destined to die in 1953, given life expectancy at that time. But he saw all of the 1950s. And then he saw all of the 1960s. And incredibly, he saw all of the 1970s. And then he saw all of the 1980s. And the amazing thing is, he's now seen the majority of the 1990s. I think one of the most remarkable things of this century of science has not been what happens in an emergency room or an intensive care unit or in the laboratory. It's the information now available to the average person. The average person actually knows about tobacco and knows about cholesterol and knows about the risks of the sun, knows about using seat belts. So the information given to the average person to run their average day can actually affect what happens to them in the future. And at the beginning of the century, we were struggling just to get scientific knowledge. At the end of the century, we're struggling to actually respond to that knowledge.
A production of WGBH, Boston.